Wonderful. We are recording this so that we can share it wide with the world. If you're hearing my voice, my name is Joy Davis. I'm the Visual Arts Director at Creative Alliance and the Principal Curator of Welcome By. And it's really wonderful to have you all in community online virtually. And I haven't done this in quite a long time, so it's kind of nice to be in this new but old format. I want to thank you to coming to be with us here for the Welcome By Virtual Artist Talk. I welcome you to our dialogue, and I hope that you brought a beverage of choice. I actually have water. I'm keeping it pretty vanilla today, but if you have coffee or tea or an alcoholic beverage, welcome. I also want to say I mentioned myself, but I have the pleasure of introducing these artists, but also to work on this project for over 2 years. We haven't had much time to actually luxuriate in public about their art practices, the artists we're going to talk to today. So this is a really wonderful opportunity to do that as we convene together, as we did almost 3 months ago, it feels like now, in Baltimore. I would be remiss if I didn't actually share with you all who actually supported what we do. And that includes Baltimore, Rotterdam sister cities, and Tent Rotterdam. If you don't know, we're going to be hosting this exhibition in Tent Rotterdam in March of next year. Also, this exhibition is made possible through the support from the Terra Foundation for American Art, the Dutch Cultural USA program by the Consulate General of the Netherlands in New York. Lastly, our last two funders, this project has received funding through a grant from the Netherlands America Foundation, as well as the Maryland States Arts Council. And lastly, some very important business, I need to introduce our wonderful artists. And I'm going to start with Tarona. Tarona is an artist, and you can see their wonderful faces here. Tarona is an artist and director based in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. She has dedicated her career to exploring the complexities of identity and in creating a space for Black diaspora to cultivate a new way of knowing and being. Next, we have Naomi King. Naomi King stands out for her ability to translate her inspiration from fantasy and rich colors into captivating mural works. What sets her apart is her strong community focus, actively involving the community in her mural projects and initiatives in the Netherlands and Curacao. Next, we have Djon Seedorf. Djon Seedorf is a visual artist, fashion designer, and art teacher with a long career in education. Djon is the son of a Surinamese father and a Havanese mother. His parents met in the former Dutch East Indies, where Seedorf's father served in the Dutch East Indies Army. Next, we have Schaun Champion. Schaun Champion is an artist, photographer, director of photography, and instructor, specializing in natural light, portraiture, fine art, and cultural documentary archival work. Using both digital and analog cameras, she creates intentional cinematic and honest imagery. And last but certainly not least, when our virtual artist talk today is Charles Mason III. Charles Mason III is an abstract painter who asks how Blackness can be experienced abstractly through installation and materials. Mason leverages symbolic content such as the color Black, hidden text, and repeated pictorial motifs like flowers and bricks to create interpretive aesthetic spaces that address grief, mourning, and morbidity. So without further ado, we're going to get started with the talk itself. Wonderful. I'm going to have us sit here with Tarona's work. And this goes for everybody, this question. What is one element of your work expressed in the exhibition that you want people to observe and think about?
I think the most important thing that I want to express is to look beyond the first view. Since my work is about carnival and the craftsmanship of their costumes, I think it's important to look closer, to put it shortly. And this is something that also embodies my work in general. So I think with this project specifically, it's really the point of looking closer, as I want people to do in general in life. Don't just look at what is in front of you, but look beyond at what is in front of you. So I think that's the most important thing for me to say.
Wonderful. Would anybody else like to answer this question of what element of your work expressed in the exhibition that you want people to observe and think about? Everyone's shy this morning, this evening. Well, I'll move on to the next question. Why is color important to your work? And what colors are you drawn to in creating art in general?
Should I answer that one?
I'm going to make someone else
I
answer.
can
Yes,
jump in
Schaun.
here for
Yes.
you.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just waiting for it to be a little more quiet in the area that I'm in right now.
Aha.
Colors. Green is always a color that is extremely important to me. Um, I think it's a color that we take for granted because we see it so often. It is a color to me that neutralizes everything around it. Um, it's a part of everything, and it's very easy to walk on by it and not pay
Mm.
attention. So greens are very important. They're grounding, they're earthy. Um, and that's all I can think of at the moment to kind of share. How what you take from that when you're looking at it is really kind of up to you.
And this is one of the reasons we share this reason, and the reason why I decided that we should paint the floor green as well. Not so much to rip off of your work, but just the same idea about grounding and space. I wish I had had that thought to take from your work, but to take that idea from your work, but it is a very grounding color. What about you, Djon? There you are.
I'm sorry. What I want to say about this project, I had a personal growth in a way. It helps me to express myself, but not only myself, because I'm very glad with this project walk on by because I'm during my life I always had a walk in the environment and walking in this environment, especially this project, I met a lot of new people, participants. I also uh, hear a lot of new stories, and I'm very glad because looking at my work at this moment, I see a lot of people that had several colors, not
Mhm.
only the black but also the white, and that is the way I'm looking at this project because I think that a new work is born, and I'm very glad to look at these pictures, and I think our work is not done. We have a
Mm-hmm.
lot to do.
I love that. You're already giving us a call to action already. And what about you, Charles, about the colors that you use? I know we had a tour with students yesterday from UMBC, and you talked a little bit about why color is important, or maybe not as important in some cases in your work.
I talked about color in terms of its sensibility and touch, and when I think about Black people in diaspora, there's a ways that color is an intuitive thing, like a natural occurrence. That's something that we just know how to do. But in terms of my work specifically, believe it or not, color is often used as a distraction. I understand color theory as a way of like giving meaning to color, but
Mhm.
also I don't really care about color theory in that way. And so, in terms of the ways in which I use color, I think about it as a distraction. For example, a lot of times people see really bright colors and they're like, "Oh, you're making so many bright things and this, that, and the third." That's usually when something chaotic is happening and going on in my life. Versus when I'm using the color black, a lot of the times it's like when something is actually happy and joyous. and it's often looked at in a strange way. Mostly because people think of the color black as the absence of color, when the color black is the combination of all colors together. And to me, black is more of a color than white is. Like when you add white to something, you're kind of negating the warmness of things. And I remember listening to a lecture by Curry James Marshall or Malika Mugozi, one of them, and just talking about how there are many ways to warm up the color black. Instead of using white, you can use ochres, oranges, like greens, blues to get it cool. And so if we understand the complexity of the color black to be able to hold and reflect and absorb and all these things, then its value is just as potent as yellow or blue or green or whatever. And so that's really how I think about color.
Wonderful. I'm going to move on and talk to you, Naomi. Does your individual mural work and paintings in the exhibition relate to one another? And if you could tell us how.
Yes, definitely. Because I am on a quest right now, finding out who my ancestors are. I'm doing that by I did a DNA test. I don't have the results back yet, but the first three works of the 13 ancestors I want to make a tribute about are being exposed at the exhibition. So yeah, they're really related.
That's wonderful. And could you speak to the two pieces we're seeing here? You don't have to reference both, but just how that process was for you in making those connections, or even inspiring you to make those connections.
Well, the first piece you see on the left is a tribute to my father's bloodline, because he is next to my mom and myself, the three kind of ancestors I already are familiar with. So first on the left, it's a tribute to my father's bloodline, and on the right piece is a tribute to myself, because I am the new ancestor in my bloodline.
Wonderful. I love that that adage of being like the upcoming or the upcoming ancestor. So I'm gonna take it back to Schaun and Tarona. From you both work with human subjects. You also work with non-human subjects as well, but I think you have a particular gift of working with human subjects, if you will allow me to say human subjects. What is the goal in working with living subjects, and what do you both hope to communicate?
You gonna take the lead on that, or you want me to take it? Me? The goal for me is memory, the rememory, and thinking about personal. I think it's a quote from Toni Morrison, with the personal and communal histories, and challenging those narratives. And to me, the way that you can do that is you have to engage with one another. Living subjects, like you said, doesn't necessarily have to be human, but just give me 1 second, please. It just got loud in here, sorry.
Tarona, take us on to how you work with in the work, particularly in this exhibition, really deals. There's like actually a lot going on, right? Like it's an active event, but you're also working with individuals. So could you speak to that just a bit?
Yeah, so I think for me, the most important aspect of working with humans, with people and individuals is dignity. This is like my biggest word. Dignity is the biggest word for me, because I started photographing also this way because I wanted to have more dignity for the Black diaspora in general, in how images are formed and how they're displayed, but also to fill a gap of what is not yet available, and to do that with dignity, because as human beings, we deserve our dignity and to be portrayed in dignified ways. This work particular also leans into that in the fact that, I mean, you're dealing with carnival. So carnival is large, it's fast, but carnival is often also, this is a deeper conversation, but carnival is often also portrayed as a sexualized event in the sense of the way it's photographed. And I decided to move away from that route in the first instance because I was thinking a lot about the body in general and the Black body specifically, and how I could portray that in a way that is more dignified. I also have full portraits of people, but I don't show them for this project, not yet. Then eventually I also started thinking about the community that is not visible, while they're actually, hiding in plain sight with the costumes that they're making. It takes a whole year to create all of these costumes. There's so much work that is being put into it. And I wanted to bring out, the idea of like, hey, you see this one thing, but there's a whole community behind it, a whole line of people, literally a line of people making all of these costumes, and to highlight something that is often overlooked. And that for me is also a way of dignifying the experience of carnival, but in a new way. I mean, carnival in itself is dignified because it's also about freedom and expression. And but I wanted to do that in my own new way. So yeah, I think dignity is the biggest thing for me when working with people.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna chime right in. That's beautiful, Tarona. So sorry I got interrupted while I was kind of thing.
You're all good.
Do you, girl? I love you. You know that.
So nature is like my golden thread when it comes to everything. And I started thinking about like our memories of like mythology and how we teach ourselves how to navigate the world through nature, and also how we associate ourselves with nature. There's this idea that um, outside of ourselves, we are always going in nature or against nature and not realizing that we actually are nature, and we're a part of it. So it's trying to reconnect and remember um, the diasporic connection to the land, and the way that we have moved through the land, the way we have been used to cultivate the land. So just kind of taking those established narratives and asking us to like to remember them in a different way, but also realizing that living things don't necessarily mean human. They can be plants as well. We share DNA with plants. And also taking photographs, not necessarily including humans, but proving that humans have touched this space. It doesn't matter if there's a human inside of that image. It needs to show that humans are kind of always around, or have been for the past however many thousand years. We are nature, we're a part of it. And I want to kind of express that and get us back to that. Thank you for being patient with me.
Of course. And I do love that your answers interpolate with one another, even if the subject matter is so different. So that's just so interesting to hear that kind of at that chorus of around dignity and nature and connection that's happening between you all's work. So I'm going to kick it to you, Charles. From large scale to mid-size, how are you thinking about the materiality of your work in the exhibition and also in the future? If I could start pushing us further into the timeline past the exhibition as well.
In terms of materiality, I'm always thinking about the remnants of something. The ways in which things exist and can then convey that something was there, something did exist, something touched it, right? And so for me, I'm always interested in in how physical the work is, how it's being torn or touched or like almost sewn back together because it's important to me that people understand that they don't know what it took for me to get here, and I don't know what it took them to get here. You know what I mean? And so, in terms of like the physicality, the touch, and the materiality of things, I'm always thinking about how any material is imbued with its own history. And so, if we understand that, then it's up to us as creators and artists and thinkers to then find ways to then add to the conversation of this material and to then expand that conversation, right? We know that, like, for example, the ways in which we use paint, there's a difference between using the basic acrylic versus using one of the brand name acrylics, right? How it dries, how it lays on canvas. There's a difference between time in the ways in which we're thinking about material, whether you weather it yourself, extremely weather it, or if it's something that literally you just allow to exist to take up that space in your studio when it's taking up footprints and it's taking up dust and it's taking up all the remnants of like just knowing that you moved around in this space, all of which are important in the ways in which I think about my work. I think about time, labor, and all these things because it's so important to know that I exist and the things that I'm specifically talking about and thinking about also exist.
That's wonderful. Djon, I'm going to actually ask you the same question, but I didn't prepare you for this. So I'm going to start with your question first, which is you present a triptych on fabric in the exhibition. We see an image here on the right. How was it working on new material, i.e., the fabric work that you're painting on fabric, and creating a cohesive narrative through the use of a triptych?
Yeah. Well, working with textile was for me a different way of working with this material. Because normally I working on wood or I working on carton fabric, but in a way, because I work with this material, a special material from the inside of Suriname. This is a typical a textile. And this this expression on the textile that it was for me not that easy because it's going further than my thought. It had something to do with my feeling, with my background, my cultural background, and then I have to think about walk on by is I walk on some environment and meeting a lot of different people, and I working with this textile. I have to think about the color I use. I have to think the flexibility of the material. It was they were very big. I didn't have a big wall, so I put it on the ground, and then I started to mix my paint and start and I just wait what kind of expression, what kind of inspiration I get looking at this textile. And what I see is what you see, that are a lot of people I met in my life, especially my family. I see my grandmother in the middle. She wore a red painting with a typical Suriname dress. And on the right, I think of my friends, a lot of white friends, color white friends, and I thought. And on the left, what you see is that is what this textile invite me to do, is to put a figure that in a way he was very sad, and I met a lot of sad people, and I thought, okay, it's good to be said sometimes, but it's better because on the back you see a lot of golden hands. That were my hands, and that express how rich we are. That in a way we are, even in what circumstance you are, we are rich in the heart by telling our stories and that's what I feel in this project. By working together in a collective way, well, it's nice to see that.
That's wonderful. I'm going to go off script a bit. And I know that I mean, I think all of you work in a very practical way, right? Like you have methods, modes, rules to how you work. But I particularly picked up on what Djon just said around the practicality of using the space or not having the space. And this also came up recently in talking with Charles as well, is around the practicality of work, right, of scale. So I wanted to know if Charles, you could speak to that first, and Djon, if you have a response, to please respond to the practicality of how you work on your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it loud where I am?
No, you're good.
All right. So, in terms of practicality, I just think it's interesting how even in art schools we're not even talked to about that. Like how
Mm,
like at some point you're out of here, and so you're not going to have the same space. You're not going to have the
yeah.
same studio. You're not you're not going to have access to the same things. And it's almost like they're doing it intentionally to cause harm. Because
Mm,
like I've been lucky in a lot of ways, I've been blessed in a lot of ways, and thankful in a lot of ways. But you gradually get larger. I just happen to be able to be in a space where I could constantly be larger. You know what I mean? In terms of work, in terms of like the size of work. Um, but there's always a practicality to that, like working with unstretched canvas versus canvas, working with found objects and things like that, because you need storage. I often find it funny when like someone's interested in some work and they see smudges and things like that. Like I'm like, it's a part of the work. It's a part of who I am. It's part of the aesthetic. And so that's when you know someone doesn't know your work, or they just think or perceive something else. Like we always have to like be practical in the ways in which we work, because we are conditioned. Well, we as in the artists who happen to be here in the states, that we have to be this way, right? Like the idea of preciousness can exist, because like I don't know anybody that just is getting head hunted by a big time gallery and that's about to store their work and climate control spaces and like sell it off the walls. So like if that's the case, we constantly have to figure out ways to store it, to ship it, to make it safe, to make it durable. You know what I mean? And that's a practical thing. Yeah.
that's wonderful. And I think that's something important for artists to hear, but also lovers of art to hear, right? Like art appreciators to understand the process beyond the making, right, of the work. And Djon, I wanted to know if you wanted to respond before I go to my next question. That is okay. My last two questions. How did you prepare yourselves and your work for this exhibition and cultural exchange? And then I have a follow-up question about your takeaways. And I would like to start with Naomi, actually.
How I prepared myself for this exhibition. Well, I really got into my own hibernation mode, so I'm locking myself up like a hermit and put on some incense and uh, grab a bottle of red wine and just sit in front of the canvas for like an hour or so. This is really like a magical moment. And for this piece, I started, my boyfriend called it chanting. He thought it was, he had the feeling it was kind of like windy, that's Suriname. So something like, and maybe a higher spirit or something took me over. And I really started drawing, or I was writing down kind of a chant or a poem that had something to do with one of the ancestors. So that's like the first part of the first layer of the work. And above it, I started drawing with it's kind of like, it's not an oil-based pastel, but it's like water. watery pastel, like an aquarelle almost. And I just started drawing. So it's all really intuitive. I don't have a feeling it's like my work or that I made it, but like maybe the ancestor that I was doing it for.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to Djon now. Same question. How did you prepare yourself for the exhibition, but also the cultural exchange?
Yeah, well, um, when I hear that about this project and you visit my place where I'm working, and I'm starting doing research between the two cities, Rotterdam and Baltimore, and I read about
Mm.
it. Why? Because I think that for me it's important talking about this project. At least I want to know something about the cities, the history of the city, and the artists in the city and the communities in both city, and that's one part, and the other part is the creative development. I had creative development in a way. What kind of painting should I use, and what should I write about it on my notebook, and the material. What kind of material I want to use for this project. That's and there's a third part, and that is networking. I talk about friends of mine, of course, but I talk also with people that work in a lot of musea here in Rotterdam, and all of this information that makes that I have to reflect myself. I have to look myself in the mirror and say, okay, I have all of this. What should I do? What kind of theme should I um, express on the textile? Because for me, it's very important that when people looking at my work, I have a story to tell, but I love that when people look at my work, that they have their own thoughts about what they see, and maybe they have questions. So this is the way I started with this project.
That's wonderful. I'm actually, Schaun, if you're able, I would love for you to talk a little bit how you prepared yourself, your work for the exhibition, and also the cultural exchange. Right? I mean, of course, I was the hostess with the mostest, but really the Baltimore artists were also hosts to the wonderful Dutch artists that came. So you helped me in that way. You played assist in that way as they were here.
Let's see. I usually enjoy organic expression. But the first thing that I did when I found out who I was being paired with was
Mhm.
look up my counterpart and instantly fell in love. Um, I loved the work. It felt like seeing myself in somebody else's work for the first time. And I realized that you know, this was an opportunity for me to do a little bit more research into, similar to Djon, um, into the relationship between Rotterdam and Baltimore.
Mhm.
And then I ran a gambit of like emotions of what am I going to create? Am I going to create something new? And then I decided to go back into my own work and not walk by that and
Mhm.
see what I could pull from that. Um, and then during that transition, Tarona and I communicated. And again, it felt like being seen. It felt like talking to myself. And I was like, is this my variant? Like, is this it felt very inspiring to like know that some part of me was somewhere else that I could tap into. And that was really important for me. But I didn't, and I think that allowed me to be in that organic space of not necessarily having to prepare for anything, because everything that I needed was already in front of me. And then when they actually got in front of me, it was like it confirmed everything that I was already feeling and thinking about. So the preparation was just to make sure that the work complemented each other, but also that we complemented each other, and I think that organic experience is what this whole exhibition is kind of about. So that's my experience with this. I hope I answered the question.
You answered my question. That's exactly why I get the question a lot about why did I choose who I chose, and why. And I think a lot of people want me to lean in on just aesthetically why I chose the artist, but it was also your mission, vision, and work around community and sense of self that became very obvious to me why that was important. Not to pat myself on the back, but to really see that as like an important strength in doing that work, right? We were together, if folks didn't know, for 7 days, and we spent time going around the city, having hard conversations, experience hard things, but also joy as well. So it's important that the experience is there first, right? So we don't drive each other crazy. It might seem very practical, as we mentioned in the earlier question. I want to take, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was surprised myself at how organic that gelling was. And it just really speaks to the attention of detail that you put into pairing us up. I saw it not just with my own partner, but with the other artists included. It seemed like we kind of took care of each other, and I loved that. So yeah, just wanted to say
that was a gift.
What?
If I could, I'm going to go to Tarona and then I'm going to go to Charles. And you all kind of shared your biggest takeaways. So then I'm going to go to my last question. So first, Tarona.
What is it that you want to know? Sorry, I'm still like processing everything that's Schaun.
How did you prepare yourself and your work for the exhibition, but also the cultural exchange? Because this was new for all of us, so preparation sometimes necessary, unless you're Schaun and you just got it like that. Walk into organic.
I mean, my heart is pounding from everything that she said, because like when I saw her face just now, I was like, I miss her so much. I just want her to be here right now. Okay, so in terms of preparation, I think there were multiple phases to the preparation. I think the preparation started for me when you and I first had, so you Joy specifically, had our first conversations about Walk on By and that you wanted to do this, because it was the first time that my carnival work was being seen. Because I hadn't shared a lot about it yet. It was very like obscure, like hidden in the back, not sure what I wanted to do with it. And then when you entered my life, essentially, I mean, you've influenced my life. What happened is that I had to actively start thinking about, okay, what do you want the work to be? What does the work want to be? What is it telling you that it needs to be, and where does it want to go? What is important? So as we were discussing all of these things over the years, because it was actually years, the work also developed. So I had to prepare myself for this new step that was coming, which was moving the work internationally, but also, how do you say that? Exhibiting it to an audience. What is the story going to be? What is important to me? What does it want to do, et cetera, et cetera. Then there was a part of materiality. How do you present the work? And then it goes back again to what is the work about? So this is something that I really had to think about, and realizing that the work was about the craftsmanship, about how these costumes were being made. I was like, okay, I don't want to print it on paper. I want to print it on fabric. what kind of fabric does this need to be? What is it made of, for example? So I had to do a lot of sample testing to see how it would take, how the ink would take, what happens if you pull it apart. So that there was a part of that, but I think the largest thing that I actually had to prepare for was on a spiritual level, where I had to acknowledge and recognize that because of the entry of yourself and all of the individuals that I've had the pleasure of spending time with. Schaun, I'm looking at you also. Okay. That I had to be open to that. Mm-hmm. Because carnival is essentially the main part about carnival, what people tend to forget sometimes, is that it's about community. And now through the work, I'm finding my own community. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I haven't been particularly accustomed to in my life. And so I had to prepare on a spiritual level of being like, okay, I'm going to go to this new space with new people and some old friends also, because I've known Naomi for a really long time. So that also felt very transitional, of like the old and the new merging together. But preparing spiritually, being like, okay, am I going to be ready to receive this energy? Am I going to be ready to give this energy? Will I do it justice? Will I do myself justice? Will I do joy justice as well, for all the trust and faith that you've put in us? And it has been an incredibly spiritual experience. So I think I prepared myself a lot by praying to my ancestors, my spirits, by writing a lot, also writing to Schaun, asking questions, opening myself up, and to prepare to be seen. I think this is a really big part of the journey, that, we talk a lot about having your work seen, but then the aspect of having someone there that actually sees you, that says things where you're like, okay, you must be a variant. Like you put it so well, Schaun. Like you have to be a variant at some point, because it's like you touch on points that I look at from a different angle, and then you turn it around and go, okay, but look at it from this angle. So it's really about being seen. And I think it's been a long process that I prepared for 3 years, and the outcome was incredible. So it's still going. So yeah, that's how I prepared. A lot of crying and praying and hoping that I can do everything and everyone justice, and do it with dignity and love and kindness. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. It has been a pleasure. Our last person is Charles. So how did you prepare yourself in your work? And also, I'm going to lean into this question of what was your big takeaway?
So it was a little harder for me personally, because I was preparing for surgery. And so, so it was kind of like twofold, right? I knew it was happening. There was preparation that was happening. There was connections. There were meetings. There were all these things happening, and I was very appreciative of all of that and connecting. I also had, like, one of the biggest things in my life happened to me in the same year that it opened. And so my preparation was just slightly different, because it was both of meeting new people and connecting with people of the diaspora. But it was also like, oh, I need to do this thing. I need to heal. I need to prepare in that way. And so I think there's always a sense of duality that happens in my life. Nothing's ever as clear or as set as it might seem, because there's always the moving parts. There's always many, many moving parts in the ways in which I exist. I'm still trying to figure out. But I think the biggest thing for me personally was just showing up always authentically to who I am. Always. And no matter how much I prepare or what I do, that's kind of like what I did, was just show up as authentically as myself and connect when I could, because I knew how important that was, but I also knew how, like, my health was too. So however I was able to present myself and like do, it was connecting, seeing everybody, and then making them like as honest and as genuine as possible. You know what I mean? And appreciating the stories of how the Rotterdam artists move in space as Black people and their identities, and there are many, many identities that are rolled up into one, are strictly and almost like explicitly compounded on itself, right? Because how we look at race and identity here in the States is completely different how most cultures and countries do. And I always find that interesting. It's almost like the States reject the ability to identify someone as more than just one thing. Knowing that we have existed and moved through space through colonization, when they took over, like, excuse me, colonization. There we go. And so I think there's something really interesting in the ways in which everybody prepared and sincerity. And this goes back to my conversation about touching the sensibility of things, and that like even if our touch isn't as deep as we would want it to be, there's a way that we still connect and leave an imprint upon ourselves and other people when we enter in these spaces of creativity, care, and love.
Beautifully said. Um, I don't have time for my last question. I maybe will ask it at the end. I do actually want to open up to the audience, but before I do, I want to share our last slide, which is really sharing with you all the wonderful social media handles of our wonderful artists, even our artist kolpeace, who couldn't be here today. And so I want to do that and just honor that. And open up our questions both in the chat, and then if you raise your hand, we'll have someone unmute you for your question. Yes, Vic.
Yeah, this is incredibly insightful. And I feel like you're all very, very different chapters of the same book. But with that said, and I know Tarona, when Tarona said that, they want to focus on details, and then everybody else replied with details about their work. Was that all intentional from the very beginning, Joy?
No. I don't. So no, and I will say this, and I would love for some of the artists to respond to this. But really, it did this choice around understanding the mission and values of the artist, not only through their artwork, but other work that they do outside of their work. As you saw, they're multi-hyphenate, and not just to be cool, multi-hyphenate because they believe in that work and that they do with the community, with students, with just different varieties of communities that might not even be their own. And so to me, that catalyzed, and that equation made sense to me, right? Like that equaled something that I knew would be powerful. Now they took it to a different level. And so I say no to say that they always impress me. So and some of them are younger than me, some of them are older than me, and I often am talking to them about them like I'm proud, they're a proud parent, but they continue to impress me, both as individuals but as a group. But yeah, if the artists want to respond to that, was that intentional the way you responded? To Tarona specifically, yeah.
I didn't quite understand the question in the way of, was it intentional that I responded to what exactly?
So you the first question was what do you want to show in your work, and you mentioned details, not just what you see in the front, but further in and what it took to make that, which feels like the story for every single one of you here today. It's basically you want to show something not just from the surface, but you want to look in. Like I know for a fact I work at Creative Alliance, but I don't live in Baltimore. But every time I'm in Creative Alliance, the work is a walk stopper. I'd go somewhere and I'd stop for a bit because I'd see a new detail, and I'd look at like the materials that are being used, and basically it's telling a story, distracting me from what I'm supposed to be doing. But what my question was, the details of your work, showing the details, was that all intentional um for every single one of you artists? Just that whole idea of don't look at it as a whole thing, find
Go
more
deeper.
things, look deeper. Yes.
Well, I can't speak for the other artists, so I will let them speak for themselves. But I think in general, from my end, in relation to the work of the others, also through experiencing every single individual during our trip to Baltimore, I think that there's a correlation there because our spirits speak to one another. And I think that, we all have an engagement with the world around us, but we also think a lot about memory. We think a lot about ancestry. We think a lot about what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be in connection? And if you look at memory, for example, do you ever remember something in full or do you remember details of something? It's the details that really make a memory more tangible, I think. And I think that is something that we all have in common, this sensibility of how we also want to communicate with each other. Also because there's a gap, which is physically, we're like literally on different continents. But I think it's a way of closing a spiritual gap that we all have in common, So I think it all expresses itself in a new and different way. I don't know if that answer makes sense, but this is what I think.
Well, no, yeah, it does, but it also, like, my question was that completely intentional or did that just fall into place?
Well, for me personally, I didn't know what the other artists were doing. So for me, it was literally a surprise to see the work when I arrived. I was on my own little island working on my own little details and then realized that what everybody else was doing was also correlating to what I was doing and vice versa and the other way around. I think it's also an exceptional pairing on Joy's end, to be quite honest. Yeah, I think we have to give that credit to Joy for sure because like it went way beyond just the work. It went way beyond the work. It really was about the people and having these conversations, which were also often very detail oriented. So I think it's a spiritual thing for sure. Yeah.
I think the overall answer is yes, if I could answer for the for the group. There was a question in the chat from George Sissel. Hi, George. What will the plan and programming for the Baltimore artists be when they visit Rotterdam? So we don't really advertise this as we didn't do for the Baltimore Exchange, except with our partners that we work with and our stakeholders within the work that we do. So there, of course, is with what we did with the Baltimore Exchange. We did have some public opportunities for the artists to engage with the community, but this is really reflection work for even myself, right? Like this, I set this up also for me to learn and grow and understand not only the artist, the artwork, but even the city. I cultivated the cultural exchange, but really it was for me to also understand the city and be renewed in understanding the capability of the city, because I knew it's capable of anything, but just to be renewed in that and some of the connections. And so something similar will happen in Rotterdam in the lens of more Dutch context. And I will just tell you this because I'm being very vague on purpose. The focus of the work was around the connectivity, as was mentioned in this artist talk, but also around Blackness, kind of a universal language, actually, that Trey mentioned, right, around color and language and how there's universal language that happens within Blackness that I cannot codify. I know that there are books on some of these things, but I would prefer not to codify. And that's really the purpose of the exhibition, too, is to not define what the artists are trying to do or what connections they make, right? Because that is sometimes, as mentioned, spiritual and personal. So yeah, there is a plan. We're working out the details. The artists don't know yet. We kind of just generally not spring it on them, but we do provide information ahead of time. But it really is supposed to be an experience for them. They've put a lot of work, as has already been reflected here, a lot of work into the work that they do and also engaging. And I just really want to drive that point home. They've been so engaged in this work. And that again makes me very proud.
Oh, I have a question. What
Yes.
besides Creative Alliance, what was the most memorable part of your Baltimore experience?
Is that question for the Rotterdam
For
artist?
the Rotterdam anime. I'm sorry, yes.
Can I?
Well, there were so many. It's not like one thing that particularly is.
Yeah.
It's the whole trip. It's uh the group of people that were put together. It's the whole cultural exchange. It's the going to another continent. It was a lot of things. It was like, I don't know. It's not one thing in particular that stands out for me. Yeah, I find that a very difficult question, to be honest.
It's okay.
Can I try some?
Yes.
Well, when I say it in my simple words, what I discover in Baltimore is that uh, most people are not that rich. They are poor. And what I saw is there was um, one visiting with a farmer.
That's Farmer Chippy.
I forgot his name. Yes, and what I saw at that moment, and really, it's still. I'm telling my friends here in Rotterdam that even you are poor or even you are not rich, if you come together, if you collective and you tell your story, and then you got the idea to do something together, and that is what I saw in Baltimore. And we saw a lot of we visiting a lot of places, and it is the same. Also, the workshop with the young people, it was very very experienced, and that's I'm not that young, but um, they throwing me back to my youth, and that was wonderful to feel that and that's make me, and that I want to thank Joy for it, that even she didn't know the Rotterdam people like us, but I don't know, it's wonderful that at last, still now, this moment, that we are a big family, and it's wonderful that art, that's the importance of art. That's what I think Joy, she she did it, and I'm thank her again, and I want to thank all my colleague artists, that I hope we have the same feeling.
Thank you.
Djon, you always say that your English is not good, but you're such a great storyteller.
Thank you. Thank
Jeez,
you.
that's
You know,
beautiful.
sometimes I know that my English is not good, but I'm speaking at this moment from my heart.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm not thinking about, is my English good or not good. I'm not thinking with my head, but I'm thinking with my heart.
Yeah.
And that's what I did feel the whole week in Baltimore. And that is special, really.
Tarona, do you have a takeaway?
Absolutely. There are many.
Would you like to pick one or
I will
two?
not go into all of them. Jesus. I think my biggest takeaway is one, the power of community. Two, to show up exactly as you are is okay.
Yeah.
And that the right people will see you for who you are. And three, that well, for me personally, I think my biggest takeaway is also it made me realize that I want to do more community-based work. and get back into education. But to do that outside of the institutional ways of doing things, so outside of the institute, but do it in a way that is more personalized and effective. And I'm not saying that institutions aren't effective, because they can be, but what I found is that to really see someone and to be seen is really the flex, right? And to feel like you're allowed to be yourself is super important, and to accept people, and that by power in numbers, you can get so much more done. So it made it my biggest takeaway is, what else can we do? That's a question. What else can we do? And I'm saying we as in all of us here, but also we as in here locally and individually. What else can we do, especially in times like these? So that's my biggest takeaway. What else can we do in a very positive sense? So thank you for that. Yeah.
I love this. Calls of action kind of coming from this is great. It's very inspiring for the work we will be doing in the new year, which seems so far away, but it will be upon us soon. I want to thank our artists here as we wrap up for just being wonderful humans, wonderful creators, and again, engaging this whole time along our journey. I want to thank the wonderful people that joined us today and those seeing us on the recording as well. If you have questions, I would love to, there's Caro. I would love to see your questions in the chat where we post this. It'll most likely be on Instagram and on YouTube. And we would love to answer your questions there that you have, either about our presentation or the presentation at 10 next year. Thank you all so much for being here. And we're going to end our journey for today.